It basically is just that, when you want to use some elms, you either, exchange US dollars to buy them, or you start doing work within the community and then someone pays you in elms. And so I guess at root, it's that people have transferred US dollars into that system. We used to allow people to have negative balances, which sort of counteracted the positive balances, but then we learned that that wasn't necessarily legal if we wanted to require them to pay back their balances, because there's some rules about what alternative currencies can do, but that's maybe more detail than we need to get into. So I want to maybe hold questions just for a few more minutes. I probably maybe got 10 more minutes of presentation, then we'll get those questions. Does that work for people? Okay. Let's see, that clock doesn't work, but okay. So here's actually, where do people make their money? So here's the bed and breakfast, one of their rooms, and that supports a couple people within our community, as well as supporting, someone who cooks at pizza night and someone who runs, who's the bartender, those kinds of things. We have a lot of people who are doing healthcare. So we have a nurse. Oh, thank you. We have a nurse, we have a chiropractor, we have a midwife, we have a massage therapist, we have people who have done substitute teaching or organic farm inspection, we have people who work online, whether that's doing websites or programming, but also people who translate things or teach people English as a second language over the internet, or work for a nonprofit. My partner works for a nonprofit here in Oakland, and she can do that from Missouri, thanks to the internet, but she's not really doing programming, so it's sort of telecommuting, but not in, what you might think that would mean. But pretty much everyone is able to work on-site without having to commute on a daily basis. And so the only person who's actually commuting to town, we have a nurse who works at the local hospital, and she goes in 3 days a week to work there. But other people do occasionally, they'll do construction work for neighbors, and so they might go, if it's too far away, they might go for a week at a time, so they're not having to drive as much. So again, really being conscious of how much we're driving our cars to meet our livelihood. And I mentioned there was someone who runs a CSA, so doing gardening work for income. He also makes cheese. He gets milk from the local dairy, turns into cheese, sells it in the community. It goes onto the pizzas at pizza night. You can start to see how it all fits together. And doing construction work. So when we first moved there, almost all the buildings were built by their owners, by the people who were going to live in them. And now we're at a place where we've got 3 or 4 people who are acting as general contractors, building homes for other people within the community and getting paid to do that and supporting themselves and their families that way. And here's an interesting building technique, that cob building that I showed you earlier. This is the roof on that. And it's a great technique where you take a post, and then you put that's temporary, and you put the first rafter on it, and the second rafter goes on the first, and the third goes on the second, and it wraps all the way around until the last rafter supports the first, and it's a spiral, and you can take that post out, and just physics keeps it standing up. And for me, this is a great metaphor for cooperation and community and decision making at Dancing Rabbit. And so we use consensus to make decisions. Probably a lot of you are familiar with that, if you're living in community right now. It's basically a decision-making process where everyone has to be comfortable with the decision before it can move forward. And so we've been doing that from the beginning. It's a great method. It does take extra work. It's hard. You really have to train people in it because we're not trained in it in our wider culture. But we're doing it. We have 55 adults sitting in meetings, making decisions together. And we've actually decided that as we see our future, we're not sure that that's what we want to do as far as scaling up to a village of 500. And so we're actually at a stage where this spring we're going to elect our first town council, and we're going to choose from among the members, we're going to choose 8 people to represent us, and they will make decisions for us, and they will use consensus to do that, and still with the mission of creating decisions that are really representative of what the group would make themselves if the group was still using consensus, and really trying to honor all the different viewpoints that are in the mix, while also still streamlining things a little bit, so that's maybe a little harder for one individual with a really outlying opinion to hold up the whole process. So we're hoping that it will streamline things as well as just scale better as the community grows. And kids in community, it's like kid paradise out there as far as I can tell. There's just at 4 years old, they have the run of the place, they know everyone, and so it's just they're up and down the streets, and they're in the common house, and they're playing with their friends, and they, so it's a great experience. A lot of the kids are homeschooled. Some of them have chosen to go to public school. There's a great public school in our county. The bus picks them up right at the end of the driveway. And we have had cooperative schooling on site where we had a teacher who took all the 8 to 12-year-olds, there were like 5 or 6 at that time, and basically taught them in a one-room schoolhouse. And she would teach all morning, and then in the afternoon, a different person in the village would teach them a different topic. And so, Rachel would teach them biology, and a guy who worked at NASA would teach them physics, and the person who had spent 8 years in Russia would teach them Russian. And it's just this remarkable experience for these children to learn in this way. And even more so, what I love is just seeing the children be part of the day-to-day life of the adults around them. They are part of the community. And here's Torin at the age of 5 getting to participate in creating the foundation for the home that he now lives in. And to me, that's more than what you can learn in any classroom is what you can learn just by being part of the world from an early age, and really not just being shunted off to okay, we're going to teach you all these things, and 20 years later then you can be part of things. You're a part of things now. You are participating. You are a contributing member of your community. And we do a lot of different things for fun. We play Ultimate Frisbee 3 times a week. We have sing-alongs. We have dances. We do partner dancing. We do just dance parties. There's workshops and yoga and all these different kinds of things, because we're in a remote area. We have to create our own fun. We don't have TV. We don't have a rule about that, but just no one wants it. People do watch movies, or they download something. Everyone's got a computer, so you can get anything you want these days. But it really is a place where we're creating our own culture and creating our own fun. And that's one of the reasons we want to grow to be a village of 500, is not just that size will have more impact, but because we actually think we can be more sustainable as we have a larger economy and a larger social pool to work with. In the winter, we do get real winter. We're in Missouri. It's 4 seasons. We're ice skating. We're playing hockey. We're cross country skiing. It's really great, and it is a quieter time for us because there's less building going on, less gardening, more planning, and more playing in the snow. A lot of sledding this winter. And so growing, we are 70 right now. We doubled in the last 4 years. We're doubling again. We're building a new community center. So the common house that we built right now, that we have right now, is 2,000 square feet. We built it, it's almost 10 years ago now, and we're building a new one. So basically, we're going to create a space that's got offices for our nonprofit, a library for our sustainability library, classrooms and educational facilities for the classes and workshops that we do, as well as a big kitchen for our potlucks, and a great room where we can all gather together for parties and meetings and celebrations. And then also showering facilities for people who don't have that in their own home, or they're still living in tents while they get their buildings set up, as well as the kitchen will not just be used for potlucks, but there'll be people eating in there on a day-to-day basis. So that'll be another opportunity for a co-op to form another kitchen to eat in. So here's the breezeway and the entranceway. This is all, we had an architect who lived with us for a year to help us design this building. And it's the first building on our village green. So it's right now, like I showed you that courtyard picture earlier, like that's what we're going to have, a larger courtyard for our village of 500, and this will be the first building on that. And so this is the view from the north, where that village green will be, as it gets encircled by other buildings and becomes the focus of the village of 500 as we grow. And here's the great room, reclaimed timbers to create the timber framing structure, and just a space where we can gather, passive solar, natural light.
Is it all computer generated?
Yeah, this is all computer generated. I wish it was this easy. We'd be done by now. But it's amazing. But yeah, we break ground in May, and we hope it will look this good, So it'll probably look even better.
Yes.
And we're aiming for like the highest level of green building with this building, LEED Platinum, which is actually pretty easy for us. That's sort of like, sort of the throwaway, but everyone's heard of LEED, so we're going to do it just because that'll like help us get good publicity. But the real thing that we're going for is something called the Living Building Challenge, and so that's like a new standard that's, a much more radical departure from how buildings are done. And so it mandates net zero energy. We're already doing that. It mandates net zero water. We're doing that as a community. But what's hard for us, and actually still a challenge, is building buildings that don't have toxics in them. And so they have a very strict requirement about no formaldehyde, no PVC. I mean, obviously things like lead and mercury, but it's really hard to find products that don't have PVC or formaldehyde or flame retardants in it. And so that's the real challenge for us, is finding those materials, sourcing them locally. They also have a requirement that materials be sourced within a reasonable distance. And so that's one of the big processes in this building. But where there's only 3 buildings certified as Living Building Challenge right now, so we're hoping we can be the 4th. One of them's actually in a community or sort of community, Omega Center, which is a yoga retreat center in New York, is one of the first 3. It's a pretty remarkable space. And we're not doing this just because, we love living in community, we love living sustainably, but, we're trying to make a difference in the world. When we started, our mission was not just to create a sustainable community, but it's to change the world. This is social change activism. It's a certain form of it where we are trying to create a positive model, to create an alternative, to inspire people, to educate what those alternatives are. And so we are, constantly seeking media attention and responding to calls from the local network. And in this case, this is the Korean Public Broadcasting System did a documentary on us. We were on a reality TV show 7 years ago, 30 Days. I don't know if has anyone here seen it? It was 30 Days Off the Grid. They brought people from New York City to come live with us for 30 days to see sort of could they handle it at the EcoVillage. And it was actually a great experience for us. And I don't know if we changed their lives particularly, but millions of people saw us. And so, but we did decline certain other reality TV shows. Like we didn't go anywhere near Wife Swap or what was the other one? Penn and Teller wanted us, and we were just like, nah, we don't trust you guys. You're gonna make us look bad. So. Cover of a magazine in Shanghai, China. This Cobb building has been on the cover of Yes magazine. You probably heard of that. So we are out there trying to, inspire, to educate, and all that. It's part of why I'm, giving these talks around the Bay Area while I'm here. And everyone's talking at this point about, we need to cut our emissions by 90%. And each, municipalities and universities, people are putting together, plans. How do we cut our emissions by 80% by 2030 or 90% by 2050? And we're at a place where we might already be doing that. We're doing an ecological audit this year where we're bringing in grad students and a professor, and they're going to measure exactly what our, or as close as they can, what our footprint is, both carbon footprint and ecological footprint. And on all those metrics, we're already at 90%, and that's just in the conservation. Then we're also providing those resources, with renewables and locally. So. Where we see ourselves positioned is working with people in those urban areas and in universities and all that, and saying, hey, we're already doing this. What can you learn from us so that when you are making your plan for 2050, we have an example of what that looks like now. And we're working on all these different areas. This is where people's impact comes from. And so we're working on food. We're working on transportation. We've reduced reduced our impact from goods and services. Our homes are smaller. We're heating with renewable, energy sources. And so, and that's something that can be done in the city as well. Bicycling, public transportation, and car share. You guys are really lucky to have, great car sharing opportunities in the Bay Area, City Car Share and Zipcar, and there's probably others. But, the things that we're doing where we're sharing, 3 cars among 70 people, I would love to see the city of Berkeley or the city of San Francisco just say yep, no private cars. You're all sharing. We need car co-ops. You start. You got to share with your neighbors, or you can be part of this larger citywide plan. No more than you got to have 40 people per car. Something like that. And public transit goes up, and biking goes up, but you still have access to cars that you share when you want to drive to Sacramento, or you need to get to Tahoe, or whatever you need to do, or you need to haul something across town. And just think of the radical transformation that you could see in a city when there's a fraction of the parking that's necessary and a fraction of the emissions and just a fraction of the space that's dedicated to automobiles, and that people are actually sharing and connecting with other people around their transit and around their just getting around. Mm-hmm. And urban agriculture. Every city these days has a chicken policy. Every city these days has urban agriculture. Gardens. When we gave a talk in Detroit, there was a woman there who's on the city council, and her task right now is to create an urban agriculture policy for Detroit, where they have 40 square miles of open space within the city limits, and they are destined to be the first city in the world that can grow all of their food within the city limits. And so that's a big task, is to create that policy. And then other cities are saying well, when you're done, we want that policy too. We're gonna, we'll copy that. But that can be the future, especially of those industrial cities that have sort of made that shift in the Rust Belt, and have population has dropped, but they can actually integrate green into the city now and really change that, remarkably. And when it comes to housing in the city, we're building new houses out of, novel techniques, but, what I would recommend for, people in the city is sort of deep energy retrofits and, caulking around windows, replacing windows to be better, higher levels of insulation, and you're in the Bay Area, that's not the climate's pretty gentle here as far as building stuff, but in, cold climates, there's so much of our energy goes towards, keeping our houses, warm or cool, and you can design and build houses or retrofit houses that really require almost no energy to maintain in that way. And there's plenty of room in cities for renewable energy. In New York is working on a 2050 plan, and once they've cut their energy use enough, they figure that they can meet all of their energy needs through solar by putting it on a third of the roofs in the city. Now that includes not just Manhattan, that's Queens and Brooklyn, but they can actually provide local energy for their city just from the rooftops within. And then you've got a distributed system that's less vulnerable to one section going out or another. And you can create community in the city. Here's Los Angeles EcoVillage, having brunch on their parking space on their street. They have very little open space in their area. This is their commons. This is they're reclaiming it and saying this does not belong to cars. This belongs to us. We're going to get out there and create community in the street, and their neighbors are going to come over and want to find out what's going on, and they're going to make that connection, and that's going to be a step towards more community, more cooperation, and more sustainability as they connect with their neighbors. So getting out there in the streets can be a really remarkable way to create that community. And so what we've learned is conservation is key. We can live sustainably, we can reduce our impact, and for us cooperation is like the secret ingredient in sustainability. For me it's an end in and of itself. I love living cooperatively, I love living in community, and it's an amazing tool that by sharing, by cooperating, we can reduce our impact and still live abundant lives. And so that's what we're doing at Dancing Rabbit, and just trying to inspire other people to do similar things. So questions? Who's got them? Here.
Have you thought about micro combined heat and power?
Yes, we have actually thought about micro. We had 2 interns out 2 years ago, and we were looking at both solar solar thermal combined heat and power, and also wood, and then I looked at the gasifier that's here in Berkeley. There's a place where they're taking wood and doing gasification, and they're not there yet, but they've also got a combined heat and power plan for the future, and so doing those kinds of things. Or is there a different system that you're looking at?
Yeah, no, that's one thing, and if you have, if you're composting things, you might be producing a little bit of methane, and you can harvest that.
Right. We would love to do methane digestion, and it's just one of those things that's on the list, but we haven't gotten to it yet. But yeah, there's a lot of potential for taking. Anything that you can compost, you can get methane off of, and then you still get the compost, and you've got energy that you can get out of it. So it's pretty great experience. Back there.
I wondered how you financed the dance building, if it was with the Elm Dollars or the board did it?
That was actually built by one person in our community who really loves dancing, and she wanted a dance space, and so she built it, she paid for it, and now she rents it to the community, and so the community shares it as a common space, but didn't have to put up the capital in the first place, and she's sort of recouping basically her costs. So she's not making a lot of money on the deal, but she was able to stipulate this is a dance space. That's sort of its first priority is when people want to dance, that gets to go there first. So we teach dance classes every week, and she has 2 or 3 dance events a year, both a contra dance and 2 blues dancing events each year. And then way in the back in the white shirt.
So have you thought about using absorption chillers for using basically a chemical heat pump system instead of simply burning the wood and using the heat from the burning?
Yeah, good technical questions. This is great. That was also part of our research. I wanted to do something where you could do, cogeneration, trigeneration, where you could do solar thermal, and then also do the absorption chillers for that. But what we're discovering is that, with heat pumps that run on electricity and the ground source heat pumps, they can be very efficient, and when we did the math, it ended up being almost as efficient to just go with photovoltaics and a heat pump as it was to do the absorption chiller system. And then because you're then working with electricity, everything is sort of a common denominator, and you don't have to deal with some of the like a whole nother system just for the absorption chiller. So I think we're still interested in that technology, but it's usually done at a larger scale. So it wasn't, when we looked at trying to incorporate it into our new common house, it was like, the products aren't quite there for the home scale, absorption chillers or the home scale. They're more on like a, when you talk about larger buildings, that's where people are doing that. But it's a great technology. I was, fascinated by it. But I'll get back here and then get some other folks up here.
What about the membership procedure and buy-in financial requirements?
Yeah. So one of our goals was to make this financially accessible to people of any background. And so, it's one of the reasons we moved to Missouri was to find affordable land. And we basically have no buy-in fee. And so you can come and join our community with no money. It's hard to do if you have debt, but if you don't have to have any money, there's no fee to join. There are ongoing fees. People pay 2% of their income to our nonprofit to help with our education and outreach. People pay a lease fee for any land that they use, but that amounts to, on average, about $300 per person per year. And then there's additional fees for like keeping up the common house and maintaining roads and the tractor, and then people pay for the car co-op, and they pay if they're part of the power co-op, they pay per kilowatt hour. So there are a variety of fees, but the cost of living at Dancing Rabbit is pretty low. I mean, the average person spends, I would say, $8,000 a year, and that sort of covers everything. I mean, that's food, housing, transportation, healthcare, all of that. And now the range is, there are people who do it for $3,000 or $4,000 a year. Those people are really doing a lot for themselves. I mean, they're growing as much of their own food. They don't travel a lot, and there's people who spend more. And the big difference is how much you travel, what your healthcare costs are. And a little bit of whether you live in a really tiny house or only a sort of tiny house, or like how fancy your tastes are, and like how often you buy new gadgets or something. But so we really do try and keep it economically accessible. But when someone joins, they do still need to create. They need to provide housing for themselves, and so they there are places to rent. There are sometimes places to buy, but a lot of times it means building your own space. So there's no buy-in fee, but there is still for some a certain economic barrier to getting housing provided for yourself. And it is hard to find jobs in our area. We do have, there's work to be done. There are jobs that you can do at Dancing Rabbit, but there aren't all the different jobs that you might want. And so if you want to do construction work, no problem, come and do it. We got plenty of construction work to do, and we've got office work, and we've got gardening that can be done. And but if you're, there's just, we don't have every job in the world, and so it can be hard for people to find even the jobs to make that $8,000 to $10,000 a year that they might want. And then you asked about membership process, and so people can come and visit Dancing Rabbit in a variety of ways. If you come through our sort of official visitor program, we give you classes and tours and workshops, and make sure that you understand what life is really like at Dancing Rabbit, and you get a week to 3 week process for that to happen. And then we also have work exchangers and interns who come for more like 2 to 6 months and are part of our community. And if you've done either of those processes, then you can apply to be a resident in our community. And then we have people who are residents for 6 months, and that's sort of a provisional membership period. And during that time, they're evaluating, is this the right place for me? Am I really ready to settle down here? And we're evaluating, like, is this the right mix? 98% of the time, it just goes really smoothly, and after 6 months, someone becomes a member, and then they have the authority to lease land and build a home, and they have full decision-making power in the community. Occasionally, things aren't the right fit. People decide to leave and go do something else. We've only really had to tell people no a couple times in 15 years, so it's hasn't been a big part of. That's not been a big problem for us. It's mostly been self-selection. So let me get questions here, and then we'll come around.
Where do your members come from? Like, are they from the local area? Are they from the Bay Area? From all over the place? Like, where do they live before they lived at Dancing Rabbit?
Yeah, they live at Parker Street, and so they find us in all different ways. They find us on the internet. They find us. I don't even know. I love it when people come who have already lived in cooperative living situations, because they already get it in so many different ways. But a lot of people are just searching for sustainable living, or they're searching for community, and they come across us, or people watch us on the reality TV show, and then suddenly they're like, this is great, this is what I've always wanted to do in my life, I've always dreamed of doing it, and they're applying for our visitor program. So we get people from all over the country. Probably a little more from the Midwest than the coasts, but but we have people from, grew up in California and Texas and New York and Minnesota. We have 3 or 4 people from Missouri, which was sort of surprising actually, because there's and then I grew up in Michigan. It's from all over. I mean, I'd say we mostly have an urban, like people coming from urban and suburban areas and sort of returning to rural areas, but we do have some people who grew up on farms but they want to live cooperatively, and so they've come to our communities. Karina?
I have 2. One is, so people, if they come with cars, then can they make their car a communal car, like donate it to be a communal car? I get that nobody owns privately,
Right.
but that's what they do sometimes or can do?
We've been focused on using biodiesel as our main fuel for years, and so if someone came with a diesel car,
right.
then they might be able to do that, but no one's
And
ever
now you're
actually
going
done
toward
that.
electric.
Now we're going towards electric.
Yep.
We may scrap the whole biodiesel program because there's issues around biodiesel in lots of different ways.
Yep.
And so that's never actually happened, and we've mostly made people, you have 6 months after you join to sell your vehicle. And that's actually been one of the hardest things, the things that, it's the rule that we most often have to enforce,
Yeah, right.
And so, unfortunately it's actually prevented us from getting donations because of that commitment to specific, and we always want the highest mileage cars, and we don't need that many cars. I mean, if we let everyone donate their cars, then we'd have 16 cars, and we'd be like,
Right.
yeah, we don't want all these cars, so.
Well, the other question is, when is your community building, the larger one, going to be due, and what's its capacity? Like, what's the high end of its
Right.
capacity for your community?
So we're going to be breaking ground this year. We're hoping it's a 18 to 24 month process. So we're hoping to celebrate, New Year's in there, and end of 2014, and we are designing it thinking that it will serve us to, easily serve us to be 150 people. What we're not sure of is, what does the community look like when we're 150? Like we've been, we know what it is at 70. We know where it's been, but it's hard to say. Like, will we just then build another of these same buildings, only larger, or will we build another one that's the same size and we'll have them in different neighborhoods? Will people still come to potlucks? Like, do you really want to have 500 people come to potluck every week? That would be sort of overwhelming. Or will it be like, only there'll be 5 potlucks a week, and it'll be like this neighborhood comes on Monday and this neighborhood comes on Tuesday. Like, so we don't really know. And so what I imagine is that over the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be thinking about so what's the next step in that game? But we are hoping that this serves us for at least 5 to 10 years. But we do see when we're done with this one, it's going to be time to start thinking about what's next. We won't be building it right away, but we have to start thinking about what that's going to look like.
And a huge amount of the land that's not used for the community, even at 500 people, right? So what
Right.
percentage of that whole property are you guys going to keep wild?
We have 40 acres of residential space, and we have another 30 that we've set aside for agriculture, and then right now there's about 200 that's either wild space, or maybe there's another, if we decide to, there's 30 acres that we could do agriculture on the far end of the land. So somewhere between 180 and 200 acres is set aside for wilderness.
Permanent.
And and that's where we've been planting prairie grasses and trees, so we're not going to undo that. We might, as we grow, buy more land to our south and to our east, so that we can actually expand the village and agricultural things closer in, rather than having to go to the far end of the land. Question here?
So I have 2 questions. They're kind of, one's related to the previous topic, and one just kind of came across my
Sure,
mind.
no
First one, so you said, I saw a picture of a cargo bike,
Uh-huh.
and I'm wondering what biking behavior is. You said it was 12 miles to the
Mm-hmm.
nearest place, the nearest city,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't really intimidate me, but I know some people who think that 12 miles is a long distance.
Right. Biking culture is pretty strong. We have gravel roads right at our community, and that's actually probably the thing that limits a lot of people from biking, is just it is harder to bike on a gravel road. It's sort of hilly where we are, and so people often make the 3-mile bike ride into the nearest town where there's just the general store, or to some of one of the other communities that's around. But it's less common that people will bike all the way the 12 miles into town, or the 35 miles into Kirksville, which is the next biggest town. But it happens, and there's a lot of biking within the community, or just to move things around. And we do have extra cycles and trailers and all tandems, and we're working with all the different pedal powered methods.
So the next question
Mm-hmm.
just occurred to me.
Sure.
So you were saying, have you looked into the long-term impacts on what plants and ecological systems you're planting as the climate potentially warms, because you're in a space where the trees are particularly vulnerable to climate change.
Right. I mean, we are aware of that, and it's tricky because different models show different things, and what we're seeing so far is not just warming, but just like more variance. We had the 3 wettest seasons in a row, and then we had a drought, and then we have this crazy hot year, and then it's but then it's the coldest winter on record, or whatever. So we're getting all these extremes, and so it is challenging to try and predict what that will be. And so I wouldn't try and say like, oh, it's going to be drier, let's plant dry stuff. It'd be more like, let's plant more diversity so that as things change, maybe we'll lose this tree species, but this other tree species that's from a little further south, ends up doing well. So we are trying to factor that in and plant a little bit more diversity than maybe, so not just sticking exactly to what was there originally, but broadening that a little bit. There's a question over here, and then
Yeah, I have 2 questions. You talked about people buying houses or whatever if they come. So how does the land trust handle real estate or improvement transfers if they do?
Right.
And to avoid speculation and so forth, do they care?
We do care. So basically, anyone owns improvements to their land, and so they can sell them to another member. And the land trust has the right of first refusal. So if the land trust wanted to buy something so that we could change something for some reason, we could. But we've never done that. And then we also have a process for saying you can only sell something at fair market value. And what we're trying to do is prevent speculation. So you can't take a really prime real estate spot right on town center and then sit on it for 10 years and then sell it to someone else later, because you can't sell the land. You can only sell your house. And so if let's say you build a house on there and it's in a great location, you can still only sell it as if that house was anywhere in the village. And so if that house would cost $50,000 to build, then you can sell it for $50,000, and you can't sell it for $1 million because someone wants to knock it down and put up something else the way that you see in Palo Alto or certain places here. So we have kept speculation out while still allowing people to recoup the cost and have those costs be reflected in a market value of their homes. And so
How do you prevent that?
the speculation, the land trust has a system. You have to, so you propose what the price of your house is or your improvements, and the land trust can say, no, we think that's an unreasonable price, and then if you disagree, then it can go to arbitration, and then 3 different people are chosen, and and you get it
And
appraised.
that's legal in that state?
I don't know. It's like we just made this up.
Okay. So my second
Sure.
question deals with, you talked about everyone has a computer.
Right.
Do you have some sort of community-wide communications infrastructure to deal with that and less expensively?
Yeah, I looked recently, and there's some huge portion of our outflow of money. You can look at our economy and say like money flows out for travel and for healthcare and for communications. We spent there's something like 25 or 30 phone lines in our village, and 10 different DSL connections, and so if someone wanted to come and set up some like collaborative system where we could get a bunch of DSL lines and a wireless network for the whole community, and we could probably save thousands of dollars a year doing that. No one has had the energy for that, and what's great is that our local phone company will come in and just like put a wire to your house, and it works perfectly, and they take care of all the problems. So it's a little bit, we could do it a little cheaper, but then you have to maintain it yourself.
So they own all the copper and everything?
Yeah, fiber and copper, and
You have
we're lucky.
fiber?
Fiber, not right to our houses, but on some of the main trunk lines. So we're actually really lucky we can get good DSL at our community, and I don't know where we'd be without the internet. I mean, Dancing Rabbit sort of like evolved with the internet, and so without it, I don't know, it would be a different community today. Question here?
You just mentioned arbitration, so I assume you have some kind of system for handling, resolving interpersonal conflicts.
We do.
And I was wondering what that looks like, and is it different for children? And is there a difference between how you handle
Yeah,
it?
children are way better at it. So we have one of our agreements that everyone has to sign when they join as a member or a resident. Is to resolve conflicts peaceably, and we also commit that if we're in conflict, we will be willing to engage in mediation. And so we have a conflict resolution team, and so if a decision is affecting the group, then they can say, hey, you need to be open to mediation, and they have a pool of mediators that will come and sit down and help people. We also use a system called restorative justice circles. So I don't know who's familiar with that, but it's more of a collective system that allows like reflective listening and this and that. And so it's I mean, they're using it in amazing places to like, you know, with gang violence and this and that, in place of you know just sort of the criminal justice system. But for us, it's also just a system for like when it's not just these two people are in conflict, but there's like a conflict that's been brewing among a lot of people. We've done restorative justice, and then the parents are actually using those same restorative justice techniques with the kids. And there's a lot of schools that have done that. But it's great to see you know the kids doing. You know, talking about their feelings and using I statements and nonviolent communication, and just like you know, they're just growing up with it, so it just seems totally normal to them. And in fact, I think they take to it a lot easier than some of the adults do. But so that's a challenge. I mean, I'd say the hardest thing in our community and probably in any community is dealing with conflict and dealing with you know other people. You know, the solar panels are the fun part, but they're actually really pretty easy and sort of proven technology. The hard part is figuring out. Creating the social infrastructure that promotes sustainability and allows for cooperation without, you know, too much challenge to that.
How do the age dynamics work? Do you have, when the kids grow up and become young adults, do they tend to leave? Do you have young adults coming and joining? Or do people who join tend to be older? Things like that.
We haven't had any adults or any kids that convert yet. We have a 17-year-old. He's applying to college right now. Probably not going to come back. He'll probably go and do something else, but you know that's fine. We get people of all different ages. I mean, people generally join at some you know transition point in their life, and that can be you know you're just out of college, or maybe you want to turn that off, maybe because we probably don't need it anymore. You know, you're just out of college, or you just had kids and you don't really want to you know raise your kids in the wider world, or you know your kids just grow up and now you're you know empty nest, or you're retiring. You know, so we get people of all different ages. I'd say we do get a lot of, especially our pool of interns and work exchangers are often young people, so we do have an influx of younger people, but they're often still figuring out what they want to do with their lives, and so sometimes they don't settle down. It's rare to get someone who's like under 25 to actually settle down, so these days, so it's not uncommon that we'll get someone coming back 5 years later, and you know we're thrilled to have them, and so we often see that as those investments that we're making, you know, that some portion of them will come back and join us at some later date. But we've got from 1-year-old to 66-year-old, so we don't have the full spectrum yet. We haven't really dealt fully with elder care, but we have diversity in terms of age, you know, all across that spectrum. You have a question here, and then I'll get you here.
Do people ever, you know, like have time to read? I'm bringing that up just because everybody, like, there's so much to do, probably, right?
Yes.
And like, such busy, and I'm a real reflective, I mean, I like both things. Do you feel overwhelmed, I guess, because there's so much to do and so many, or do you feel like it's balanced because everybody's sharing and you can find respite, you know, just to have some time out, or?
It really depends a lot on the person. I mean, I'm a doer, so I like being busy.
Yeah.
And I find plenty of ways to keep myself busy. There are plenty of people who, you know, they've arranged it so like they only have to work part-time, and they're, you know, and then a lot of their, you know, so a lot of their other time is like they're gardening, they're, you know, making their own clothes, they're doing all these things that people consider hobbies, but this is what they're doing to support themselves. And so like there is a lot of that. And yeah, people take time to read, people take time to, you know, connect with their friends. I mean, to dance. I mean, in general, I think we do have a little bit of like a work hard, play hard culture, but winter is definitely a time that's more reflective, and people do have a little more downtime then. And for me, one of the things I love about taking the train is that I get 2 days when I go from Emeryville to Ottumwa, Iowa, where I just sit and read, you know, basically, and relax the whole time. So there, I do find my ways to get that. And interestingly, you know, in the wider culture, people have an abundance of private time and private space and a lack of connection with other people. And we're in a place where we actually have an abundance of connection and opportunities for that. And people have to be very careful to make sure that they take time to themselves, take time for alone time, or just, you know, family time. And because, you know, there's just so much going on, and it's so vibrant, and there's all these people around that you want to connect with, and sometimes you do need to just like, I'm gonna sit and read a book this weekend, you know, and that's great. So, back in here and then over there.
How many people started the community 15 years ago, and how many of the originals are still there?
There were 6 of us who moved out. 6? Yeah, 6 who moved out to the land, or maybe 7, sort of depends on who you count. But and there's only 2 of us left who are still there. We had, I'd say, I mean, half of them left within the first few years, and then one of our founders just left about 5 years ago, and that's hard. I mean, it's hard that there's so few of the original group there, but we really started with a clear mission rather than a group that was super cohesive. Like, we weren't necessarily a group of best friends who really had committed, like, we want to live together forever. It was more like, we want to work on this project. We're creating this thing together, and I think all but one of those people is now either living in community or actively working full time on like sustainability issues. So it's not that those people's values have changed, it's just that they found other environments to do that. And we have plenty of people who have been there 14 years and 13 years and 12 years. So it's there is stability there. It's just not many of the founders that are left. So this gentleman here, and then, oh, you got a question back there?
Yes. So you mentioned earlier that it's hard for people to come in if they have debt. Seeing how a lot of students now come out of school with large amounts of debt, what's being done to address that?
That is one of the trickiest things. I mean, we sometimes get people who are early in their college career, and sometimes I encourage them to drop out because it's just not, because they're going to leave college with, I don't know what people, $100,000 in debt, $200,000 in debt, depends on where you go. I mean, it's crazy. And then they're tied to some system where they have to make enough money, and they can't really do that where we are. And there's abundant opportunities for learning outside of a college environment. So I do, so alternatives are an option. But we've had people who have been able to pay off their college debt. I mean, depending on what your monthly payment is, like, people have done it. And we've even, I've even seen people within the community like loan money to other people so they could then have a lower interest rate than the college debt. But yeah, we don't have a great way to address that. I mean, a lot of people are coming out of college and then they're sort of tied to the system for a long time, and we don't have an answer really.
Have you experimented with biochar?
A little bit, not a lot. I mean, we've put some in our gardens just to see, like, so does this really help your garden and how does that work? But we haven't like gone full scale in terms of like, trying to really sink carbon into the ground through a biochar system. The boiler that I showed, that our gasifying boiler, one of the great things about it is that you could actually, every time you do it, if you choose to shut it down in a certain way, you can actually get a 5-gallon bucket full of charcoal every time. And so for a while I was doing that, and then I'd like throw it outside, and eventually it made its way into the compost and then into the garden. So we've done a little bit, but we haven't like gone, like, I'm still not 100% sure that it's like you see the things that are like biochar solution to everything, it'll be wonderful, and I'm just like, really, I want to see how this goes for a few years, and then before we just start dumping it everywhere in our gardens. But I'm very intrigued. It's very interesting. So here and then here.
Maybe I already do this, but have you considered writing a book or maintaining like an online resource with all this knowledge that other people can read for their own houses and their own communities, for their own gardens?
Yeah, we're in a process right now of trying to sort of collect, especially around building technologies, collect the sort of wisdom that we've amassed, and just like writing, getting it all written down, because we have a great sort of like oral thing where if you come to Dancing Rabbit and you want to build a home, there's 10 people who will chat with you for hours about the best way to do that, but we need to get that written down so we can share that more broadly. I'd love to write a book. I'd love to do a documentary film. We need to get the word out more, and there are times where we're so busy doing it that it's not only hard to find time to read, but it's certainly hard to find time to write or to be part of a film. So there's definitely we'd love to have people come and help us with that process, and it's definitely part of our plan. Every year I say, like, oh, I should write a book, and just haven't gotten to it yet.
Do you guys have a vision for elder care or so the sort of last phases of life?
Right.
What do you see or think of right now?
Right. I mean, we're trying to design everything so people can age in place. I mean, all of our common spaces are ADA accessible. We don't have like a hospice care space with like the resources for that, but my hope is that we're building both the social structure as well as the physical infrastructure to make it so that people really can age in place. And I've seen that in so many other communities, be so amazing and so beautiful. It is hard. I mean, there's still things that are sort of rugged about our environment. So like people with mobility issues are a little bit challenged by the. So even if we design the houses to be ADA accessible, we don't have all of our paths ADA accessible. So that is our hope, is that people will be able to age in place. And my guess is that we will have I mean, as we grow, not only will we have a birthing center, but I think we'll have an elder care space, and at any given time there'll be a handful of people who are needing that level of care, that they need the specific medical care right there, but mostly they can live in their own homes, and people will come to them and support them. Like I think,
and not just physically but socially, like
Right.
you have the children participating, and that's a big piece, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts or ways of elders participating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, again, every elderly person is different, and some people want to mostly hang out with older people like themselves, and some really thrive on having children around and whatever, and so we want to give people those opportunities, whatever that might look like, to still be getting those needs met. And I think that there will be as we get to that point, that the social structures will be there in place to make that happen. JJ?
As that grows to the ultimate population that you're talking about, between 500 and 1,000, are you thinking about maybe developing a little health clinic for at least basic health issues? And we talked, I think, at the long haul a little bit about like a school, depending on the level of children you build.
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to have those kinds of resources in our village, and I imagine, and we already have a nurse, and there's a place where the chiropractor and the massage therapist share an office, and we have a midwife. So I really do see that we will have some sort of healthcare center within our community soon, and not just for us, but even like for people from around the area to come and take advantage of. But yeah, someone's got to do that, and it's hasn't happened yet, but I think it will. And similarly with a school, I mean, there's some people who are like, we don't need a school specific building. We just the whole village is our school. But there still needs to be a place where you can store the books and where you can put the kids on a rainy day and whatever. So I think there will be those kinds of spaces. And our common house has 2 kids play spaces. That can be utilized for that, and even, I mean, one of the original visions for the dance space was that during the day it could be used as a classroom for small kids, and we don't have enough for the cooperative school right now, but as they age into that range, I think we'll start seeing more of that. Back here.
I don't know anything about Missouri politics and civil governance and all that, but what sort of level of interference from the local authorities do you have to deal with? I'm thinking about building codes, permitting processes, etc., that type of thing.
Right. We moved to Missouri and to the area that we're in because there's no zoning and no building codes there. And so there is no inspector, there's no one to check up on us, which means we have to do it ourselves, which has its problems, but we do have a health inspector, so like the bed and breakfast cafe has to be certified for health and all that. So there were certain things we had to do that were like, oh, can we do it this way? They're like, no. But they were actually fine with the composting toilet, but we had to do sort of a more elaborate gray water system than we thought was necessary. But so we don't get a lot of interference. I mean, we're in good terms with the the sheriff and the newspaper and the judge and all that. So we do pretty well. And I mean, as we grow, there's a possibility that certain statewide regulations will start to come into play. And so, like on our new common house, we've learned that any building serving 25 people or more on a regular basis has to meet certain standards as far as water. And so we're having to make sure that that's in place, and that's a statewide regulation. It's not, and there's no county person to inspect it, but there is still this regulation. And because we're so public in what we're doing, we have to make sure that there's nothing that can happen so that someone can come in and shut us down. Because the last thing we want is like, someone gets sick or says they get sick, and then they come in and they shut down our common house and no one can use it, and like that's happened to other communities, and we just really can't afford to let that happen. So it's both for the actual safety of things, but also just because we need the community to have that freedom to be public about everything that we're doing. So everything has to be above board, and luckily we don't have a lot of regulations to contend with. Here, and then I'll get Raina.
On the flip side, do you think at some point you'll have enough people in the community that you can influence like local county politics?
Oh yeah.
Actually,
yeah, we're already a significant portion of the voting population in our county, and when in the last election, all of the we invited there weren't that many contested elections in our county, but for like county commissioner, we invited them to come down and speak to us, and so that we had all these politicians, for the politicians that aren't really politicians, they're our neighbors, but they came down to our common house and talked about, their platform, so to speak, and it was great. And because there were like 70 votes, in the room, and so they were all pretty interested in that. And I think that we can start influencing, if we are going to have building codes, we can be part of writing them, and we can, I think if someone in our community wanted to run for school board and stuff like that, I think we could. We just, we have enough, all of our civic energy goes into our own community as opposed to going into the broader community at this point. Rains, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering the perspective now, lessons learned, advice for people that are starting out to create or searching for community at this point, other than moving way out there.
Right. I think the key thing in both cases is really getting clear on what's important to you and what your vision and values are. And so if you are starting a community, make sure that you're clear with yourself and with your group. Okay, what are our core values, and then what are the things that we're willing to compromise on? And so if you got to know whether you're going to be a rural community or an urban community, or you're going to get to a point, and some of those people are being like, what are you talking about, Central Valley? I thought we were doing it in Berkeley, and it's like, you can't have that. You've got to get clear on those core things, and then you've got to know the places where you're going to be willing to compromise. And similarly, when you're looking for a community, there's thousands of communities out there of every stripe, imaginable, and there is not the exact community that you want, because if they're, or that's rarely happens. And so you have to figure out, here's the things I value and here's the things I can compromise on. And so it might be location, and it might be that it's, not as eco as you want it to be, but you really value the connections that are there, or it might be that there's not the spiritual focus that you really wanted, or it might be, that it's larger or smaller or farther away from this or that, whatever it might be. And so you've got to be really clear on that. And I think that was essential for Dancing Rabbit in getting started, was really having a clear vision, but still leaving enough flexibility so that, we had this, sustainable village, and we defined what sustainable meant, we defined what village meant, we knew we were going to be in a rural area, but then, you can be whatever spiritual path you want to follow, and you can, earn your money however you want to do that, and we don't care who you're sleeping with or whatever. That's left up to as many people, so that other people can add their vision to it as well, so they can, so we're not saying like, oh yeah, and we're going to have goats. It's like, well, you decide whether you want to have goats or sheep or cows. Like, that's not our business. We want to leave that flexibility. And I think that's been really valuable, is to, focus on those core things and then allow people to bring their visions into your community, rather than, there's some places where they have the vision for the community and it's like all the houses will be round and all the fences will be this high and everyone will, eat this diet, and it's just like, who wants to join that, So if that was your plan, I recommend a little shift in that. So.
And the directory, I see.
Yeah, I mean, there's cards here for Communities Magazine and the Intentional Communities Network, which is the Fellowship for Intentional Communities, www.ic.org. There's also some Dancing Rabbit cards here, and like, the thing that really helped Dancing Rabbit succeed was getting networked with other intentional communities. We never would have succeeded without our connections to the FIC, without buying land within 3 miles of an existing community, without making those connections to a national movement. So I can't say enough about how important that was for us. And I highly recommend connecting with other cooperatives, other communities, other eco-villages, whatever. Other people doing something similar, and even other people doing something that's only a little bit like what you're doing, because you'll learn lessons. And so, visit them, look at their, steal their bylaws, model yourself after them, do whatever you can.